I first, no, didn't turn it on. This one's supposed to be on. Yeah, but I don't want, oh no, I can't do that because then we lose the other one. I have mine on now. I don't need that. Sorry about that. In 2009, I encountered the book The Last Week. Marcus J. Borg and John Dominic Crossan, subtitled, What the Gospels Really Teach About Jesus' Final Days in Jerusalem. What this book did for me, along with other books like Biblical Amnesia by Scott Gustafson, from which I took the readings for this morning, was to clarify to me that the cutting edge of Christian scholarship and thinking is a lot closer to where I stand than it was when I remember it 40 or 50 or even 60 years ago. The Last Week by Borg and Crossan describes their motivation for writing the book in the preface. Summarizing their motivation in my own words, they cite the 2004 Mel Gibson film, Passion of Christ, as a key factor for writing their book, because the film emphasized only the suffering aspect of passion while ignoring what Borg and Crossan considered to be the more critical reading of the word passion. They see the passion of the prophet Jesus, his consuming interest, his dedicated enthusiasm, and his concentrated commitment as being the salvation of people, the restoration of balance on earth. By definition, salvation, from the same root as the word salve, is healing. It's not a ticket to heaven. Borg and Crossan see Jesus' primary passion as helping people by modeling the message that if you treat other people equitably, working towards justice, fairness, by demanding a fair share for every person, you may find that you are living a version of the Edenic, peaceable kingdom, heaven, right here on earth in everyday life. I was hooked. Unitarian Universalists have for generations held that living the example of great prophets like Jesus would do more to save humankind than the creeds or professions of any faith. The writings of these authors and others have helped me to frame my conversations with traditionally Christian friends and relatives without either compromising my own spiritual and ethical framework or outright insulting the beliefs of my friends and family. Reading these books has helped me move from the stories I learned as a child to focus on what scholars conclude really reflect the most consistent vision of Jesus, son of Joseph, man of Nazareth, within the context of the backwater country under the domination of imperial Rome. Borg and Crossan focus on the version of Jesus' last week as found in the Gospel of Mark, and here's where the telephone game comes in. Mark is the first gospel that was written down. It tries to just talk about the adult years. It is the earliest of the canonical gospels, written only 40 years after the execution. It has the advantage of separating things, providing clear timelines, and because it's the earliest one written down, it has the best chance of recording things that the earliest followers of Jesus believed in. Borg and Crossan take great pains to emphasize context. Oh, I feel so bad. They take great pains to emphasize context, drawing the reader's attention to metaphorical truths, differences between parables and allegories. They're veterans of the Jesus Seminar. They are keen to find, point out, and give extra weight to consistent behaviors and words attributed to Jesus, and they flag things that appear to be out of character. In reading Borg and Crossan, it became possible to look at the stories with new eyes. As an aside, my students know that even in science classes, I was always stopping to define terms. The term repent comes, that is looking with new eyes. The term repent comes by a circuitous path from a term that archers use to suggest that a change in stance will allow one to see the target more clearly. We often get a definition that means to turn around and take a new path, but I kind of like this one. I'm going to focus only on the first day of the week. In Palestine, in the time when Tiberius was emperor, the local people counted the days of week as the first day, the second day, and so on to the seventh or Sabbath day. The last week in Jesus' life, we are told, was the week in which Passover would be celebrated. It was early spring. We don't know how early, since like the date for Easter, Passover is determined based on a particular lunar sighting after the vernal equinox. I can tell you from experience that winter in Jerusalem is often cloudy, cold, and very damp. While Passover itself would not begin until the fifth day of the week, hundreds, if not thousands, of pilgrims would have been streaming into Jerusalem on the first day. There would be housing to arrange, shopping for the Passover meal, visits to the temple, and so much more. And of course, not everyone would be coming just for religious observances. Crowds were a good mark for pickpockets even then, and the yokels could be conned. And then the insurrectionists would probably be there recruiting. The local garrison might be overwhelmed. So in preparation for this influx, the procurator, Pontius Pilate, would have left his seaside residence on the warmer, drier Mediterranean coast and be traveling south with many of his troops to Jaffa, where they would turn east to march through the narrow pass to enter the cooler and possibly rainy Jerusalem from the west. No doubt the equivalent of their regimental banners were unfurled, and perhaps drums and trumpets sounded as they approached the city. Many such entries are documented in the records of Roman colonies throughout the empire. If you were a Roman loyalist, or one of the hundreds of locals whose livelihoods depended on Roman support or spending, you might be at the Jaffa Gate of Jerusalem to cheer the arrival. If, on the other hand, you were a prophet or a follower of a prophet who saw the inequities of the imperial system, you might want to be as far from the Jaffa Gate as possible, perhaps on the east side of the city, even on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the temple, dreaming of better days. Jesus, his closest friends, and many other Galileans had no doubt been walking south along the Jordan Valley for several days before turning west from Jericho to ascend the plateau where Jerusalem sits. It is at this point we turn from the context to the text. It is here that we need to listen with new ears and see with fresh eyes if we want to learn a lesson or two that the prophet can teach UUs. In the 11th chapter of the Gospel, attributed to Mark, we read, in translation of course, which makes us even more careful in our reading, that Jesus sent two of his friends ahead to an outlying village to untie and bring a young colt for Jesus to ride on into the city.